Welcome back to Drat and Drake podcast. Joining us today is Dr. Trish Auge.
All
Nice to
right.
see you on.
Hi.
Wow, what a special person on today. Dr. Drake, can you tell me who Dr. Auge is and what she means
My
to
mom.
you? Wow, all right.
Easy person to bring on, right?
Yeah, well, third episode here of the podcast, and we're bringing family. That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
All right. Well, tell me about Dr. Auge. What's her story?
Start from the beginning as
Start
far
from
as,
the beginning.
just as what made you want to be a vet, where you went to
Okay.
school and kind of how that was in the 80s.
Yes. So ever since I was little, I always wanted to be a vet, which at the time we were like, I want to be a doggy doctor. And that was all I ever wanted to be. So my mom was very gung-ho, helped me do that. Although there was a time when I was in college, in undergrad, the days before women were heavily into veterinary medicine, that I had a counselor at school say, maybe you should be a nurse because there really aren't
Oh,
women
no.
in the veterinary field.
Wow.
So do something more traditional for women. And I said, well, I really don't want to do that. I'd like to at least try. And then when I got in, which was just a year or two later, I finished my bachelor's and then went to Oklahoma because I grew up in Minnesota and I didn't want to be going to vet school another 4 years in Minnesota cold. It was just very, very cold.
Uh-huh.
And that was the winter of 76. It's like, I'm out of here. So went down to Oklahoma, and it was a little different for me because there were a lot more large animal, but women were already entering the field pretty well in numbers.
I've noticed
So I think we
actually.
were,
I was looking at CSU when they have a whole hallway of all their graduating classes, and I saw a giant shift. I think it was like the early '80s is when women started to start trickling in, and it was a distinct to the class of '80 to '81 had 3 women, and then '81 to '82 had half of women, and then from there it was just pretty much female,
yes.
predominantly female.
Yeah.
Uh,
And then it was nothing. It was no big deal. If anything, people would comment about keeping guys in the field, just so a happy mix,
That's how it is
happy
now.
mix. And my husband, who I know Remington has spoken about him before, but he graduated in 68 and there was one woman. And I guess that was pretty traditional. One, maybe 2 women. But yeah, for us, it was good.
Mhm.
So got in, did a lot of large animal, not by choice, but that was Oklahoma. Did a fair amount of large animal, but I was wanting to be small animal
Mhm.
and graduated 83.
So
So
did you, as far as you had 2 years of like third year rotations and then fourth year, is that how that worked there?
yes, and we could pick. They were, I can't remember the term, but it was kind of like sections. You could pick this section and this section, but it was kind of a lottery. So I got a horse section and then a cattle section. And the one thing that always stands out in my mind was on my equine section, I had to go in at 2 a.m. for this colicky horse. And I was the only one in the whole big barn, or it's not a barn, but
The building.
stocks,
Yeah.
the building, yeah. And had to get this big horse that was really struggling to breathe and function, walk him down the way to the actual stocks, right? It's
Okay.
been too many years.
I
And
can tell you haven't been in large animal.
None of us are large
Yeah.
animal vets, so we're just,
Yeah.
we're making up words.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, for 4 hours from 2 a.m. to 6 a.m., I was kind of terrified at first, but he did what he was supposed to do, and
Mhm.
I did my thing. And so that was my big memory of dealing with humongous horses. But then,
before you went into vet school, did you have any large animal experience at all, or was it just zero?
zero.
Yep.
Yeah, no, nothing. Didn't even really get to ride horses other than
Wow.
I think once at a touristy thing.
State fair or
That was
something.
it.
Yeah. Same.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So
So
you
then
graduated, yeah, and then or how did you?
graduated Oklahoma State
Yep.
in 83, then did a bunch of interviews, which in those days it was so much different. We didn't have the internet. I mailed out, would make calls via landlines.
Mailed
And
out.
What
You
does
would send
that?
envelopes to
yes,
hospitals saying, "Dear
yes,
Doctor So and So, I'm trying to be a
yes,
veterinarian associate for you." Okay.
yes. And then I heard from several that I could do interviews. So I scheduled a driving tour, leaving Minnesota, going through Chicago and Ohio, and mostly through New York and New Jersey. And
Well,
fortunately, I had what's that?
well, I guess I just I don't want to skip over details that I have questions on. I mean, as far as
Yeah,
the like finding out which places had job postings, if you didn't have the internet, how
Oh
would you
yeah,
know?
the yellow pages.
they we well, we still had the journals, print journals.
Okay, so everybody just
So
had to get their ad into those journals and then they sent them out. Was it through the AVMA or
yes, the
okay?
JAVMA
Hmm.
that was around in those days.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
It's,
Look at that. Look at that.
and you didn't have any issues. So it sounds like the good thing is your school counselor was wrong about, women being able to be veterinarians, obviously, that they can be way, way successful, more successful than most of the guys, I'd say.
yes.
But as far as the situation once you got out and you were trying to find your first jobs, did you feel any of that reluctance to hire women in, or did it change already at that point?
Yeah, it did not seem to exist at that point. It
Oh,
Interesting.
good,
was,
good.
yeah, women were just what it was very common at that point.
Okay.
And I didn't feel it.
Well, good.
I mean, maybe it was something.
I've already heard
Go ahead.
stories from professors, who have encountered, especially if they're large animal, who've encountered some level of sexism from clients. Is that
Oh,
is that something that we
yes.
might have skipped a little bit forward here, but obviously, now that you became an associate, but then, and we'll get back to that. But since we're on the topic of this type of stigma, how did you encounter that? You must have, right? Just during your time practicing.
Well, not in practicing, but only in school
Hmm.
with these, like you mentioned, large animal. So there were, when we would go out or I'd accompany the vets, which were guys, and they would go, "Oh, a woman, how do women handle this? Can they handle horses and cattle?" So people seemed really open and good, but they did seem leery
Hmm.
of the
Okay.
women.
Got it.
Okay.
So who knows what they said when we weren't around, but they
Sure.
were good.
Okay.
They were good.
Okay. Nice.
That's
So you,
crazy. I didn't know that shift happened so quickly. But and
Yeah.
especially, I don't know. To me, I guess I'm kind of shocked that it was, early 80s. I guess I would have. I don't know. It's one of those things I didn't really have a set time frame in my mind. I guess it was kind of more of a gradual thing that I thought of over a period of, decades. But I mean, would you say that there's anything that happened in the 80s that kind of triggered that change, or was there someone like famous on TV that, really showed like, hey, this, that that being a vet isn't a man's job, that everybody is able to be successful at it?
I don't personally, I think it is a reflection of the 60s and 70s. Because
Okay.
back in the 60s, women weren't in bands. It was the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, it was all guys.
Huh.
And women weren't news anchors. And so it was a gradual shift of women's rights. And so it really was sneaking up. And I think some of the older people may have perpetuated that.
hmm,
But the younger crowd coming up was rolling in, and it was like, you're not stopping us. So
So it
it
sounds like
kind of,
overall across industries, it was kind of all happening at the same time. It wasn't specifically veterinary medicine.
Right. It was
Okay.
exploding
That's
because
cool.
the young people were just doing their thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
By the time you guys were
Good.
born, that the for the most part, some of those shackles were lifted and the ceiling was raised for you guys, correct?
Well, not before me, but
Oh yeah.
some of those other women, yes. But I
Got it.
was around to see the 60s and like Woodstock. And, there were
Mhm.
just things that were burn the bra and
Yeah.
we equal rights. And so, yeah, it was a good movement. Good movement.
So then now you interviewed, you made the road trip down. What happened next?
So then I did get some letters of people wanting to hire me. I don't know if there was a shortage or they liked me, but the one of them, I will say, they were. I just we did not have the information like we have now to say, oh, there's a shortage, there's not a shortage.
Uh-huh.
But I did get several job approvals, and then I wound up just staying in a part of New York that was
Hmm.
Albany, Schenectady, and Troy, three different practices, small animal. Stayed there for a year, and then wanted to move back to Minnesota. So that I did for a short time. And then my brother said, hey, my vet said we're real short on vets here in Vegas. You want to maybe check it out? So I made a road trip out to Vegas because again, there wasn't the internet.
Uh-huh.
And so did that and landed some jobs there and chose one that I stayed at for about a year. Then things got fun because I went to the big Western Veterinary Conference and got my registration materials and sat next to this. There were a bunch of tables, so I wanted to see what lectures there were. So I sat at this table with this guy and I said, hey, any good lectures going on? And he said, yeah, there's a lot going on. And so we started talking and he asked where I was working. I said I was working at one place and doing some relief. And he said, well, why don't you start a cat hospital? Because there isn't one in Nevada. And I said, oh, cool. How do you do that? And he said, well, let me take you to lunch and I'll show you what to do. So we
Smooth.
went to lunch and he kind of jotted on notes what to do to open a feline hospital. And I thought, well, this will be cool. And I really started out more as a house call practice,
Mhm.
but that built quickly. And then I wanted to do a building. So I kind of did that. Meanwhile, this guy was in Boston. He had three animal hospitals in Massachusetts. And he said he would fly out and we'd go to conferences and then he would fly out every month. And then 4 years later, we got married.
Oh,
So that
okay.
was Remington's dad.
Ah, uh-huh.
Yeah.
I figured this guy was a little bit more special than
Spoilers.
that,
Yeah.
right? Okay.
Yeah.
So this
I
cat
mean,
out this cat practice happened pretty organically then.
Yes.
Okay. Very
Yeah.
cool.
and as far as
And I wasn't
oh, go ahead.
well, I was just going to say I wasn't a cat person at all. But, in vet school, you learn cats. And I thought, how hard can it be? It was actually one of the best journeys. And to me, I'll take a grumpy cat any day, any day.
Okay.
But, it's just because that's what I've done for so many
Of course.
years.
Of course.
As far as the house call business, because Alfred, you were mentioned that you have friends in your circle that are, doing house call and like
Mobile vets,
mobile
yeah.
vet type stuff.
Mhm.
Yeah. When you were doing house calls back then, do you feel like there were was that a common thing to do? Is that your common way to start out, or was that a little bit more
I know in
unusual?
large animal they've always been doing house calls, so I would
Right. Yeah.
imagine
So for
there's
large
been
animal,
Mhm.
obviously you had ambulatory service, but as far as
Yeah.
before you started your feline practice, did you have a good sense of like how a mobile vet practice worked back then? Was there kind of a traditional way of doing it? Is that a traditional path that you had before establishing a brick and mortar? Like, what did it look like back then?
Well, I really didn't know. I knew there were house call practices, but they weren't very common, and I can see why, at least in that time, because now I think there are aren't there the big trucks and
Yep.
which aren't cheap,
They
I'm
get
sure,
fancy.
but
Yeah.
yeah. But at the time, I did it because it was a way to start, but I quickly wanted more.
Mhm.
I wanted cages. I wanted a place to do a spay. And I did not have that truck, so to speak. I had my bag of tools and I could use the kitchen table if I needed to. But, you want proper nowadays, you just couldn't do that.
Absolutely.
I mean, I guess you could if you were desperate,
Yeah.
but it's not very cool to do that. So
So
I wanted more.
Okay.
would you say that the equipment was the most challenging part of it? Or what would you say are kind of the top things that really made it a difficult thing to do?
Two things. One, the equipment, and two would be someone to help, a technician or a vet assistant. Because I think in large animal, I think you have places to restrain the animal and maybe owners help.
Hmm.
But back in the day, I don't know if that was the case, but yeah, it was hard to do things, especially on cats, without restraint. It's just can't imagine it these days.
Makes sense. Now I hear, with the few cat clinics I've been exposed to, you have the luxury, since it's exclusively cats, you can develop your brick and mortar hospital tailored around their whole experience. So, yeah, I mean, for example, I guess the ultimate question is, can you walk me through it? But from my understanding, even for places where they have behaviorists involved, they really try to make, even from the beginning of getting to the parking lot, entering the lobby, this ease of experience for, emotionally for cats. How did do you have any kind of advice or any tips on kind of how to work through that, or how your practice operated?
Yeah, I took the approach with which I learned very quickly is that cat people did not like going to places where they felt their cat was scared and wasn't treated like people really cared about cats. So we didn't do anything like pillows on the floor, but we had softer materials for the exam room
Mm.
tables, had plants around and softer lighting if possible, like at
Okay.
least have a lamp in the room. And and then of course we didn't have the barking,
Yeah.
but and it was an expression to the owners how much we cared. And I think that was important because we didn't rush them through. We didn't treat their cat in a way that they would find objectionable. From early on, we used a towel folded up, like I'm sure everybody does. But that was our restraint. Just snuggle them, do the little burrito wrap,
Hmm.
and and often do it in front of people so that they would know that their cat wasn't being hurt. Because obviously you're hearing them, but if you're not seeing them, then they don't know what's going on. So, but that was pre-COVID that we would do everything in the room other than blood draws and surgery, of course. But it was, it tried to do everything we could to soften the atmosphere for the cats.
That's very
Have
nice.
some treats in the room.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. So yeah, I mean, you could even argue you're one of the pioneers of cat behavior and client
Yeah.
compliance. That's great. You don't
Yeah.
see a lot of that, unfortunately. Even with vets that are, closer to our generation of practice, some of them still follow very archaic methods of restraint and, well, yeah, and consultation. So
Yeah. Which, you know, what's interesting in that line, early days, I was taught to scruff and stretch a cat. And so I scruffed a cat once in the exam room early when I started, within the first year or so. And a client was like, "Oh, can you not do that? You're hurting him." And it was like a light bulb. And I was like, okay, if she finds that upsetting, I adopted, which was still on the cat hospital website, that we are a no scruff hospital. And I wouldn't let people scruff. And is it effective? Yeah. Oh, good. Yeah. And
Yeah.
and we were fine. The worst, absolute worst came to worst, we might need some sedation. And of course, there's better sedations than ever. But it was just, and I found with owners, when people would, you want to do it quickly and you don't want to charge so much money. But if you say, "Hey, I think little Morris needs some sedation here because he's pretty upset," they were like, "Oh, yes, yes, that would be great." Because they didn't want him scared.
Yeah.
So made the client happy, made the cat happy. And consequently, it made us happy.
Yeah. Ah, that's music to my wife's ears. I don't know if Dr. Drake told you, Remy told you, but my wife's she's a veterinary behaviorist. So, in the
Yeah.
years that we've been
Oh,
together, she's really taught me. So I've, since the last 7 years, I'm very no scruff. Of course, it's been challenging because again, you work with hospitals that don't practice that way, and I'm trying to teach these new technicians, and they're just I mean, they've been doing this for years for scruffing, so it's a challenge. So hearing that you've been doing, you've been practicing, and having this clinic that's been, again, been doing this for so long, it's just it's music to my ears. It's great.
Yeah.
yes. 38 years
Wonderful.
we had no scruffing. So, and it worked well. Everybody was happy. And I remember maybe twice in that time that people, of course, other technicians or assistants would go, "You know what? He's or she's scruffing." And I said, "Work with her. Don't tell her we don't do that." And then it was just a matter of learning how to do it in a nice way.
Yeah,
So, yeah, it
Well,
was
you
good.
just showed, yeah, or in
that's
organic way, just
that's
how it can
cool.
work.
That's
So,
cool. Yeah,
Yeah,
I love to hear it.
yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
so would you
So,
say?
Yeah.
huh? Go
I'll
ahead.
go for
Sorry.
it,
Yeah.
Alfred.
Yeah. No, please.
Well, would you say, as far as I mean, because it sounds like when you were venturing into like a feline exclusive practice, that it sounds like to a large extent you were figuring out how to make it most effective for cats and make it, the best experience that you can for cat owners. Do you feel like there are any kind of current misconceptions with vets that aren't feline exclusive that you would say, maybe not what a lot of vets think, or ways to approach feline medicine that you feel would be good for a lot of vets to be aware of, or any tips, I guess, you could give the field for vets that maybe aren't as, that mostly see dogs and don't have a lot of feline patients to really get this same level of organic growth and kind of getting a good handle of how to treat
Yeah.
feline patients.
Well, yeah, and I think the few I've seen since I retired and now am planning on working some more, from what I've seen, because I have options of working with dogs. And I know most places will have separate entrances and maybe exam rooms, but that seems to be as far as it goes. I personally would like to see newer architecture built where cats could at least have more division. And I know there are cat wards as well, right? In places you guys have been. Are there?
Yeah,
There
I
are.
mean,
Depends.
eh,
It
yeah, I
depends.
mean, in CSU there were
Hmm. There
cat
is. It's
exclusive
dedicated. Yep.
areas.
Hmm.
Yeah, which is really cool to see.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, so you're
Yeah.
saying you would prefer almost like two separate hospitals within one building, and there's no real overlap for the most part between them. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. And especially, I know it's difficult in treatment areas. I think that's the most difficult. So in my mind, I would, if I were designing, I would think, how can we have two separate areas and maybe a glass sliding door or something,
Mhm.
or, and even especially on the cat side, something that would be more decorative to a cat, whether it's birds or some vines on the glass, something that would help a cat to think, okay, I'm not in the same room with this big old golden retriever that's happy go lucky walking by me, but scaring me. So, yeah, if there were some way to separate that,
Okay.
and I know with doing the dentals, you you probably can't have separate dental suites, right? But
Arguably,
as
I
much
guess it
separation as
depends. Okay.
possible.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I mean,
But I
basically,
know the equipment.
you'd almost have to design it to where a lot of the common stuff would be in the center, right? And then you could access it from two halves of the
Yeah,
building,
Yeah.
right?
That'd be pretty
Almost.
cool.
there
But
you go.
Yeah.
yeah,
I
Yeah.
like
that'd
that.
take a lot of dedication on the front end to really plan that.
To build it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean that would be a very powerful practice.
Yeah.
Yes. Ooh,
Now you
like that light
mentioned
bulb going on.
you mentioned, write that down, business idea. So you mentioned that you retired and now you're looking about going back to work. So Remy has explained to me several occasions, his work ethic and how he's adopted that. And he oftentimes will quote you and also his dad. And I've learned that both his parents, of course, you and his dad, are incredibly hard workers. Can you tell me, as someone who I would say I have pretty good work ethic, I don't think I'm on the same level as Remington. I don't, and I would imagine I'm probably not on the same level as you or your husband. So can you, and Remy's explained to me in his very complex terms of how that feels when he's not working. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. And this is kind of a multiple part question, just because, as someone who's, of course, diving into more responsibilities on the work end, and my wife, who is also kind of starting a business, we have our child. And how do you process this aspect of putting so much into your work while also being an effective parent?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think at the time, we didn't really, or maybe we sort of thought, well, okay, let me back up. First of all, since we ran our clinics, we had no choice but to dive in. It
Okay.
was encompassing. On the weekends, if you had to do payroll, that was before we did payroll companies and things you order and just all kinds of things that have become stronger, OSHA rules, everything. So we had no choice, but on the weekends, open the mail, do the ordering, do stuff. And the kids, in retrospect, I think saw that and were developing. They would play, but they also would watch us and they were learning. They were subtly learning, which I think is really good. I think that was a good teacher. And at dinner time, we would talk about cases at work. And, I hope this doesn't offend anybody, but we might bring up the bad, bloody guts case.
Mhm.
And they would just be eating, and, it was no big deal to them. And so, which is probably why Remington went into veterinary medicine. But
Uh-huh.
my daughter was like, no, yuck, I don't want to do that. But she's certainly respected and valued the amount of hard work she saw us do, and she duplicates it as well. And so I think that's important. The more you can get involved with work, and a part of me, I don't know if I would have liked to have come home and 6 o'clock, I'm done, and no work. I don't want anything to do with it. But we just loved it. We just loved it.
Okay.
So I think we're better for it. Now, the only bad thing I will say, and Remington, tell me what you think, is we didn't really do, like on the weekends, we didn't go horseback riding or go-kart riding, or, some other hobbies.
Mhm.
Can you think of anything that do you feel we missed out on with you
Um,
guys?
Hopefully, I didn't open up a can of worms here, right? It's like,
right, no, this is
oh,
now
you
family
never
counseling.
did this.
Yeah, yes,
I'll be like
yeah.
the
So what do you
leave
think?
Britney alone,
I know,
crying, and
right?
that kind of thing. No, I mean honestly, I mean it's one of those things that realistically you don't have anything to compare it against, right? Because you only grow up one time, right? But no, I mean there's
Yeah,
nothing that I can really think back on that felt like I was missing out. And I think you're right that
good.
as far as having early visibility and having a front seat as far as what a veterinarian all the responsibilities that come with being a vet, what that looks like, really I agree. I think it's subtly influenced how I perceived having a career or a job, where it didn't to me it felt it blended well within every aspect of your life. It wasn't something that you just had your hard cutoff times when you go to work, when you come out of work. And I think I saw, the joy that you guys had in terms of discussing cases and having ones that were a little bit more challenging that you would talk through as far as saying, well, what other avenues can we explore as far as, diagnosing this specific case and, really seeing the fun and what makes vet med cool. But
Good.
you know, yeah, I mean, it was, I think for me, going into my own career, I had the same approach that as long as you can find an appropriate balance where you feel that you have enough positive connections with people at work, you have positive connections with people who you knew through, other places that you did work, and you've got your network around you. And especially, I think veterinary medicine is really good at having a fairly cohesive network of people that we're all passionate about our jobs. So it's, I think, easy to have that blending just throughout your life. I think there's definitely a way that you
Hmm.
can have it bleed, your work bleed out around the work hours and not feel like you're committing your whole life to working, that you can strike a balance
Yeah.
without even really realizing it. Um,
Well, plus, you guys very early on had school activities and the karate times, and
oh yeah.
Devin with volleyball and cheerleading. So there were so many activities you were involved in, and then we would do our summer vacations. So
Hmm.
I guess in retrospect, there was a good balance.
Mhm.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, as a third person, right? I mean, I think Remy came out pretty balanced, pretty well rounded.
Yeah,
He's in tune with
good.
himself and very, very reasonable with things. So, which is, I guess, as a new parent, that's all you can ask for, right? Is someone who's a contributor to society and has a decent heart, right? That's kind of right.
Yeah,
So, okay.
Good to hear from
yeah.
Daddy Alfred.
Now, no,
Well, and it is cool, I think, if I may just
of
like
course.
kind of sum up, as Remington said, I do think it's really cool that what they learn at the dinner table and watching. Oh, someone
We have a
coming
little,
Do
in.
you have a ghost?
we have a
The,
little puppy
Hey,
here,
come in.
Hanky. Yeah.
ah.
Hey, Hank.
So yeah, I think kids gain a lot from those things. So I think that was good.
Mhm. Okay. Now, the three of us, again, I'm married to a veterinarian. Remy's married to a veterinarian. You're married to a veterinarian.
Yeah.
How we all have our own stories of how that is. My wife and I, we have sometimes arguably a little bit of an ego thing. And there's good discussions, but obviously sometimes disagreements. I don't know how Remy and Steph are. I'm curious, it seems like at the dinner table, you guys would talk about cases. How is your professional relationship with your husband?
Oh, you mean at the dinner table?
Just in general,
You say?
just as two veterinarians in this, very much in the same field, was that something that felt was very rewarding because you both understood each other very well, or were there sometimes issues because, well,
Yeah.
he's another veterinarian, this is another conflict or for another reason for conflict, you know?
Yeah, I don't think that if anything, we were always pushing for the best, pushing for advancement. And so I don't think we wound up arguing. I think he was more of a mentor to me in the
Hmm.
beginning because he was more experienced. And I think if anything, it was like, hey, I have this cat. What do you think about blah, blah, blah? And he'd say, well, did you do this or that? And I'm like, well, yeah, I tried that, but it didn't work. Well, then try this. And, but sometimes I guess, and I don't know if you remember now that you're asking that, he might be cut and dried and say, well, just do the first thing. But it wasn't like a back and forth. Do you remember any of that, Remington? It was,
Um,
we didn't really argue about cases, did we?
no, I mean it was a fairly, I mean, again, I don't have anything to compare it against, but yeah, no, I mean, you guys had a fairly good working relationship with, being able to be two veterinarians that respected each other's opinions. I felt like you both had feedback that you could give each other on case, you know, case experiences and stuff. And I think at least as far
And
as
he might
mine,
joke. Go ahead.
yeah, no, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say he might joke and say, well, I'm right, you're wrong, so just go with it. So it
Normal
would be
relationship.
a humor thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and I think as far
So,
as for me, Steph is in her own little specialty that it's
Fair.
so, ophthalmology is, I think, one of those specialties that most other people know there's a complicated world that exists over there that,
Yeah.
you know a little bit of it, but there's so much complexity to that. I think a lot of vets kind of are like, all right, we'll let you handle that.
Checkmate. That's not
Um,
it.
yeah, I mean, they're going to go way over your head on a whole
Oh yeah.
bunch of stuff. But, and I think that's for me, working ER, you're kind of a jack of all trades, master of none, where, you need to master being able to be effective and capable in a time constrained manner. But
Mhm.
you're largely going to be working hand in hand with those other specialties to say, okay, we're being air traffic controlled to get them stabilized and to get them to you.
Mhm.
So I think her and I have kind of adopted that dynamic a little bit, at least in terms of, anything non-eyeball related. For me, it's a little bit more of like, well, I have a little bit more, personal experience with working with that case versus for her. If it's anything technical with eyeballs, I'm like, please,
Yeah.
please give me your give me your wisdom on this.
In her chat yesterday, she used the word disticchia. I was like, when was the last time I ever? I don't think I ever used that in my medical record.
Yeah,
Yeah, I would say
they
Pam.
love their fancy words.
Oh yeah, Pam's behavior also, of course. I mean, I would never. I mean, it's always been default. I mean, she's the expert at that, and it's been very rewarding to learn from her.
Yeah,
So
I think it's common. I mean, it's so common for veterinarians to be married to other vets,
yeah,
and I think part of it is just we're around each other so frequently.
yeah,
But I don't know. I think the personality of I think just the culture of veterinary medicine in general, like there isn't a lot of I think egos and competition between most veterinarians, but I'm sure you could find an anecdotal
surgeons.
counterpoint to that. Yeah, maybe.
yeah.
Just like in human, man. Eddie, if you're listening,
Yeah,
we're
I know,
not
right?
we're not including you in that.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean it's I think a good dynamic, and I think you guys had a healthy professional working relationship. So yeah, if
Well,
you're a veterinarian out there thinking marrying another veterinarian, it seems to be a pretty successful model.
just
So
combine the student
Yeah.
debt, and
Right.
yeah,
just don't think
Yeah.
about it,
just don't think about it.
Right.
Well, here
Yeah.
let's go to our last segment, and I apologize, Trish. I actually didn't tell you this. There's a part called sarcoma, and it's kind of work in progress. I'm still debating. Remy and I are going to see if we want to keep it, but essentially, we talk about two things in each. It's one thing that currently you find very enjoyable, or something you want to talk about that just brings light to your day. Okay. OMA,
Hmm.
of course, is usually more of the benign tumors, so they're not usually very, very bad. And then you have your sarcomas, which typically can be pretty aggressive. And those are the things you feel like complaining about right now. Something that just irks you, something that really bothers you, something that just dampens your day. You know, um,
Oh, so you're kind of saying this is the happy mellow thing, and this is the irks me. thing.
That's correct. Yeah. So, for example, recently a lot of the time since we're in Florida, the OMAs would be currently the weather during the winter is finally not hot, and we love it. An example of a sarcoma is the driving here because it's always terrible, and it doesn't have to be restricted to
Oh,
just Florida, but really anything. And I don't know, Remy, if you wanted to start, or if you wanted me, or Trish, if you'd like, if there's anything off the top of your head.
Yeah, I can start.
yeah.
I would say my OMA is getting to spend some time with my mom. That's,
Oh,
always a huge,
Oh,
yeah. I mean, I can go on and on about that, but yeah, hugely positive thing. And then I would say my
well,
sarcoma
we'll do the
is,
omas first, and then we'll go to the sarcomas.
oh, we're grouping them.
Yeah,
Okay.
we group them.
oh,
Yeah. So
Circle of omas.
yeah, my oma will have to be my baby's finally started solids, so it's been an absolute treat watching her taste food
ooh,
and just explore flavors and all that. Of course, what we do now is we just have her completely stripped just down to her diaper because it's an absolute mess. But it's a beautiful symphony of 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 dirtiness, and it's just been an absolute treat watching
oh,
her. Yeah, just kind of you see her brain
yeah.
working as you give her something, and she's just thinking about it, and then she opens her mouth because she wants more. It's just,
I'm gonna be a foodie when I grow
oh,
Oh,
up.
it's just amazing.
oh, how cute.
Yeah,
How old is she again?
she's almost
4 months? Is
approaching
that right?
approaching 5 months now,
Oh,
4.5 to
very
5.
good.
Yeah, hmm
How cute.
yeah.
Boy, I don't think I have a good Oma. Because the only, uh, I guess the only thing that comes to my mind, which is tainted by veterinary medicine, is which isn't really medicine. It's just my animals. Because I retired in August, and I have too many animals, but I have 2 dogs and 3 cats, and but they are the joy of
Oh,
my life when I'm at home alone. So it's it's a wonderful thing to have them in something so small, especially now that both of my kids are gone and I have to travel. And it is super cool to be able to come out here to Florida and see Remington. And I think I'm going to do it more often. And
yeah.
maybe my Oma should have been Rover because Rover allowed me to come and visit him. So
Hey,
it's good. So
this
I like the
podcast is
pets and I,
Sponsored by Rover.
sponsored by
yeah,
Rover. Oh,
yeah,
that's so
that
nice.
works well so far. I was
Okay,
pleased.
awesome. All right, Remy, what's your sarcoma?
I'd say my sarcoma is, so now that I'm responsible for the roof over my head now, I've had two things break. One of which, I mean, this could be a reliable one, being a homeowner now, right? Is the light in the bedroom burned out, and of course, modern lights are no longer just those light bulbs that you twist into the socket. Now it's this complicated computer-esque, thing that looks like it needs a keyboard to get it working on the
How
on
fancy
the.
is your
Have you
lighting?
seen?
Yeah.
Your light
No, look at
fixture?
it. No, Google like the ceiling fan LED things. Like it's got all these microcontrollers and capacitors, and I don't know, but
Oh, I think you just have to.
it's
All right, yeah. I mean,
you just have to unplug it and
I
replace
know,
it.
right? I think well nowadays like, it's an LED strip, right? So that is frustrating because I feel like now I don't think you can just replace the LED strip. You almost have to replace the entire fan. But it's built to last for like 40,000 hours, so I don't know how that happened.
If only it's
I know,
lasted what, like,
a year and a half.
if that.
Yeah,
So
because didn't you say there's some surging going on
Oh,
here
yeah.
that's
oh
causing
yeah,
your lights
oh,
to short
That's
early?
true.
Florida, yeah.
Yeah, actually, that happened to my fan light too. It's not nearly as bright as the other ones, and it's because we had this whole issue, and now since then it's just working at half capacity. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, so yeah,
Wow.
that's
it's
the
a solid,
sarcoma.
solid
It's
sarcoma.
figuring out that
Yeah,
problem.
home ownership.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
mine would be, well, you guys just saw Hank walk through the door here. He snuck his head just around this area. He was recently
Yeah.
he was recently diagnosed with a brain tumor. So
Oh, I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah, there's
Oh,
some light at the end of the tunnel here. You know, we're working with the radiation
oh,
oncologist. He has pet insurance, also sponsored. Well, everyone get pet insurance. So, you know,
ooh.
fortunately, we don't have to dive deep into the funds to kind of get a diagnosis and treat this. We are looking towards radiation therapy just because of a good overall quality of life. We're not trying to stretch and, you know, be selfish about this. This has been a long conversation with my wife and I, but yeah, that's been a pretty hard couple of weeks
Wow.
for us to maintain. But you know, he's happy so far, so we're just gonna try to truck through and get through it.
Oh,
Yeah,
oh, poor baby.
yeah,
Well, it's good. At least you have options.
we got options.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I have a parasites because I lived in Vegas for almost 40 years,
I was like
and we
confused.
didn't.
I
Wait,
have parasites.
Yeah, yeah,
go on.
parasites. No fleas, no heartworm, no, no mosquitoes. So the only time we'd have tapeworms were people that go to California and they'd get fleas and get tapes. But I never had to medicate my animals. They
Hmm.
were always parasite free. Now I moved to Austin uh, 6 weeks ago, and they have to be on parasitic treatment. And
Oh,
and I guess I haven't seen the how bad parasites get, especially flying ones in the summer. So I'm like, oh, that makes me miss Vegas a lot.
yeah.
So yeah,
That's too
parasites.
bad. Yeah, no, that's gross. It's disgusting.
I guess I'll get used to it like everybody else though,
Yeah.
right?
You
Yeah.
can spend more time in
Yeah.
Florida, and you'll see a lot of pets
You'll,
here with
yeah.
parasites.
We just had a whole cockroach fiasco this morning, so I know.
Yeah.
Oh,
They're the worst.
oh,
I know. They're
yeah.
the big ones, not the
Well, it
tiny tiny
sounds
ones.
like,
Mhm.
Ones you can make a pet.
well, what
Yeah.
about, oh, yeah. Yes, and the big ones. But then there's the termites. Those seem like those would be really bad
Ooh.
because they eat your house,
Yeah.
right?
You got to get those treated. If not, well, hopefully, I mean, when we bought our house, it was tested for termites, so we're good. I won't be
Oh,
surprised if
so it's
next year
not
Remy.
something that just appears.
No,
Yeah.
yeah, you do eventually see it, but if you actually, I have no idea how termites show up. I guess one day you just
Teach us
find
about
out
termites.
after your
Well,
roof
Yeah.
I think
falls
the
down.
nightmare is, yeah, you pull a little something off the wall, and there's a whole
Uh,
beam that's
uh,
falling
Oh.
apart there. So I don't know.
Well, that's
Fortunately,
a good
never had to deal with them.
that's a good way to end the podcast today, huh?
Yes.
Thanks.
Dr. Auge, yeah, thank you so much for coming by. I know you flew to Florida specifically to have this episode, so that means a lot to us.
Yes. Yes, for sure. Yes, you're welcome. Glad to, that was fun.
Yeah,
That's a lot of
glad to
fun.
finally meet you too.
Yeah, you as well.
Yeah,
Thank you.
of course. All right, Rem, you got anything to say?
I Nothing specifically. I mean, yeah, this
Okay.
was fun.
All right.
Just mirroring what she said,
Yeah.
but
All right, guys. Well,
Yeah.
hey, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you guys next time.
see you later.
All right.
All right.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye bye.